Imagine living in a place where dying is against the rules, not frowned upon, not unlucky, actually, officially, illegal. There's a town on the edge of the world where, if you feel your time is coming, the authorities will politely ask you to leave, board a plane, fly somewhere else. Because here, you are simply not allowed to die. This sounds like the setup for a dark comedy or some strange fairy tale, but it's real. The town exists. And the reason behind this bizarre law is far stranger and far more chilling than you might expect. Welcome to Longyearbyen, a small settlement on the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard. It sits about 800 miles from the North Pole, deep inside the Arctic Circle. This is one of the northernmost permanently inhabited places on the entire planet. Around 2,000 people live here, surrounded by glaciers, jagged mountains, and a landscape so remote that polar bears actually outnumber humans. In fact, if you leave the town limits, you're legally required to carry a rifle because a bear encounter isn't a possibility here. It's a genuine daily risk. But polar bears aren't why dying is forbidden. The real reason is buried in the ground itself. Longyearbyen sits on permafrost. That means the soil beneath the town is permanently frozen year-round, going down hundreds of feet. And this frozen earth has a very unusual property. It preserves things. Anything buried in it doesn't rot away the way it would in warmer soil. It just stays there, frozen in time, sometimes for decades, sometimes for far longer. The problem became clear in the 20th century. The town had a small cemetery, and bodies were being buried in the traditional way. But people started to notice something disturbing. The corpses weren't decomposing. They were being perfectly preserved by the ice, and that raised a frightening question. What exactly was being preserved along with them? In 1918, a global catastrophe swept across the world. The Spanish flu pandemic killed tens of millions of people, more than the First World War itself. And it reached even here, to this tiny frozen outpost. Several young miners who worked in Longyearbyen caught the virus and died. They were buried in the local cemetery in the permafrost, and then largely forgotten. But decades later, scientists realized something extraordinary. That deadly virus, the one that killed millions, might still be alive down there, frozen, preserved, waiting. The permafrost that stopped the bodies from decaying might also have kept the flu virus intact inside them. In the late 1990s, a team of researchers actually traveled to Longyearbyen to test this theory. They carefully exhumed some of those flu victims, hoping to recover samples of the 1918 virus to study it, and they succeeded. They found genetic traces of the pandemic strain, still readable after nearly 80 years in the ice. Think about what that means. A disease that reshaped human history, sealed away in the frozen ground beneath a quiet Arctic town. If those bodies had decayed normally, the virus would have vanished long ago. Instead, the cold kept it locked in place. And that discovery sent a shiver through the town because it revealed a genuine danger. If burying the dead here preserves whatever killed them, then every grave is a potential time capsule of disease. So the authorities made a decision. They stopped burials in Longyearbyen. The cemetery was effectively closed to new arrivals. If someone dies here today, their body is transported to the mainland of Norway to be buried or cremated somewhere. The ground actually thaws. And that's where the famous phrase comes from. It's illegal to die in Longyearbyen. Now, to be clear, no one is going to arrest a corpse. You won't get a fine for passing away. But the law is functionally true. You cannot be buried here. The town is not equipped to handle death in the permanent way that death usually demands. And it goes further than that. Because the settlement is so small and so isolated, it isn't built to care for people at the very end of life. There's a hospital, but it's designed for emergencies and everyday medical needs, not for long-term terminal care. If someone becomes gravely ill or is clearly nearing the end of their life, they're generally encouraged, and sometimes required, to travel to the mainland. The idea is simple but stark. This is a place for the living, and specifically, for the healthy and the working. That leads to another surprising fact about Longyearbyen. It isn't just death that's discouraged here, it's also birth. The town has no maternity ward equipped for complicated deliveries. Pregnant women are expected to fly to the mainland several weeks before their due date to give birth safely. So in this strange Arctic community, the two most fundamental human events, being born and dying, both officially happen somewhere else. People come here to work, to explore, to study the ice and the stars and the wildlife, but the beginning and the end of life belong to the mainland. You might wonder, who would choose to live in a place like this? And yet, Longyearbyen is a genuinely vibrant little town. It has a surprisingly cosmopolitan character, with residents from more than 50 different countries. There's a university focused on Arctic science, where students study glaciers, climate, and biology right at the frozen frontier. There are restaurants, a brewery, shops, even art galleries. During the long polar summer, the sun never sets, circling endlessly around the sky for months. And during the deep polar winter, it never rises at all, plunging the town into weeks of continuous darkness, lit only by street lamps and the shimmering green glow of the northern lights. This unique isolation has given Longyearbyen another remarkable role. Just outside the town lies one of the most important structures on Earth. It's carved deep into the side of a mountain, protected by that same reliable permafrost. It's called the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Sometimes people call it the Doomsday Vault. Inside, in freezing chambers, sit millions of seeds from nearly every country in the world. Wheat, rice, beans, and countless other crops. It's a backup for humanity's food supply, a safeguard against war, disaster, or catastrophe. If the world's crops were ever wiped out somewhere, the seeds stored here could help bring them back. And the reason it was built in this exact spot is the same reason burials were banned. The permafrost keeps everything perfectly, naturally cold. The ice that preserves the dead also preserves the future of our food. There's a strange poetry in that, isn't there? The very same frozen ground that made death dangerous in Longyearbyen also made it the safest place on the planet to protect life. The cold refuses to let go of anything. It holds onto viruses and seeds alike, onto the past and the future, with the same icy grip. But here's where the story takes a modern, worrying turn. That permafrost, the foundation of everything here, is beginning to change. The Arctic is warming faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. And as temperatures rise, the permanently frozen ground is starting, in places, to thaw. Scientists have recorded rising temperatures around Longyearbyen, unstable slopes, and even water seeping into the seed vault's entrance tunnel, something its builders never expected so soon. The ground that was supposed to stay frozen forever is showing cracks in that promise. And this reopens the very fear that closed the cemetery in the first place. If the permafrost warms and the old graves begin to thaw, what happens to whatever is still preserved inside them? Researchers around the world are increasingly concerned about ancient diseases locked in Arctic ice. In one case, in Siberia, thawing permafrost released anthrax that had been frozen for decades, infecting animals and people. The dead, it turns out, don't always stay safely asleep. And in a place like Longyearbyen, where a century-old pandemic virus already lies buried, that possibility is more than just a scary idea. It's a real scientific concern. So the law that makes it illegal to die here isn't just a quirky piece of trivia. It's a window into something much bigger. It's a reminder that nature keeps records we can't easily erase. That the ground beneath our feet can hold memories and dangers far longer than we imagine. And that as our climate shifts, some of those long-buried secrets may not stay buried. Longyearbyen remains one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, a town of scientists and adventurers, living under endless summer sun and endless winter night, guarded by polar bears and surrounded by ice. A place where you can be born, but not quite. Where you can live fully but not die. where the frozen ground protects the seeds of tomorrow while keeping the ghosts of yesterday locked away just beneath the snow. It's a town balanced on the edge of the world, and on the edge of a question we're only beginning to face. What happens when the ice that holds everything finally begins to melt? For now, the people of Longyearbyen live their lives fully, aware of the strange rules that shape their frozen home. And they carry on, right at the top of the world, in the one town where, quite literally, life goes on, but the end must wait. So the next time you think you've heard every strange law in the world, remember this little Arctic town and the frozen secret that made dying against the rules. If this reshaped how you see the frozen corners of our planet, subscribe. We uncover one unforgettable true story from our strange and wonderful world every single week.